Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Charlton sent me a note and said, Steve, check out this story. A deputy who took a vehicle for a joyride, was not his, got a suspension for that, but not much else. And a lot of people are wondering about this case because what happened was a guy got arrested for DUI, and he'd been in a Corvette when he was allegedly DUI. And after they removed him from the Corvette and arrested him, somebody got in the Corvette and took it for a ride. And that's the kind of thing that would upset a lot of people. So Jessica Shalagi wrote this for the GeorgiaVirtue.com website. A sheriff's deputy in a Georgia county was reprimanded only minimally after taking a sports car for a spin after a DUI arrest. Public records show that the county deputy took a $70,000 Corvette for an excursion after the arrest of a motorist for suspicion of driving under the influence. Now, the story actually happened about a year ago, but it's just breaking now as to what had happened with respect to the punishment of the police officer. In the early morning hours of September 5, 2021, a sergeant on active duty as an Army Ranger was driving on U.S. Highway 76 in Towns County when he was pulled over by the Towns County Sheriff's Office. The man was driving a 2015 white Chevrolet Corvette, which belonged to a friend. After a handful of field sobriety tests, they asked the man to submit to a blood or breath test, which he refused according to them, so they placed him under arrest. So now they're taking him away, and there's this Corvette just sitting there. Deputies charged the man with driving under the influence and laying drag. We'll get to that in a second. Those are both misdemeanor offenses. The tickets issued to him were time-stamped at 12:24 a.m. and denoted that he was arrested in the signature line of the citations. And he was then transported to the jail, but not in his Corvette. The arresting officer subsequently obtained a search warrant for the blood. They got the blood at 1:45 a.m., or at least that's when they got the search warrant. In the meantime, another deputy awaited the arrival of a tow truck. Now, I used to drive a tow truck and tow vehicles for the city of Birmingham, Michigan Police Department. And I would show up at the scene of something, and they go, Steve, tow that vehicle. And I'd often ask them what happened. Why am I towing the vehicle? But I needed to know, is there something wrong with the vehicle? And so I remember doing tows for drunk driving cases where they say, oh no, the driver just got taken away. Here are the keys, and tow the vehicle. Take it to the impound yard, take it wherever. But of course, I'd show up someplace and they go, oh no, this vehicle was in an accident. And I'd walk around and look, and sure enough, there's some damage I had to work around, okay? So the tow truck is going to get called. So a deputy's waiting for that. GPS records show that the deputy drove the Corvette after fellow deputies took the driver of the car into custody and took him away to jail. Now, the deputy who was taking the vehicle for a joyride was unaware that the vehicle was equipped with a GPS tracking device linked to an app. And he was captured taking a joyride at 1:09 a.m. Owner of the vehicle was notified of the whereabouts of the vehicle and the speed at which it traveled. This is all stuff that modern technology can define for you. Sources say that the GPS records show speeds topping 100 miles per hour after 1 a.m. on the date in question. The GPS coordinates correspond with locations on U.S. Highway 76. Ironically, the speed limit on U.S. Highway 76 in Georgia ranges from 45 to 70. So driving at a speed of 100 miles per hour would probably be a moving offense. Probably. Now, laws are different in Georgia. I'm kidding. Of course, it's a serious offense. After the ride, the deputy returned the vehicle to the location of the traffic stop and awaited it to be towed. A towing company towed the vehicle to a lot in accordance with county policy. So he took the car out, drove it around, somehow got it up to 100 miles per hour, and then brought it back to right where he started from. Now, he's hired an attorney, and his attorney has made statements, and now everybody's kind of arguing over who's wrong and what's going on here. A local publication suggested the deputies at the county jail told the man who'd been arrested that a deputy won't take the car for a joyride. Don't even worry about that. And when he said he'd like to file formal complaints about this transaction later, they said, if you do, that report will come back to haunt you. Words to that effect. At some point after the arrest and before the vehicle was retrieved, somehow the vehicle sustained damage to its front end. Weirdly, the obviously apparent damage prompted the man then to return to the sheriff's office to file a complaint. So the man who was arrested came back later and said, by the way, my friend's car got damaged after you guys took possession of it. Meanwhile, a key fob with a price tag of $1,000 belonging to this man's own vehicle, he had apparently 2 sets of keys on him, was missing from the car when the man was released. So the man was released, went to look in the car, and he couldn't find his key fob. So he then received a text from a deputy, and I was texting about the key fob. And so he was reportedly contacted by a deputy on multiple occasions via text message and phone calls from an area code of 561, which is an area code in Florida. But it indicates that this deputy had been a law enforcement officer in Brevard County, Florida, before moving to Georgia. So that's how we can link the number to this deputy. Now, the sheriff suspended the deputy for 2 weeks without pay. So that's the punishment the man got for taking the car for a joyride at over 100 miles per hour and potentially damaging the car. But he was suspended for 2 weeks without pay. However, they did not voluntarily report the offense to the Georgia Peace Officer Standards and Training Council, or POST. Now, under the POST rules, an employing agency must only notify POST of a suspension in excess of 30 days. So it looks like they may have done this specifically to keep it under the reporting limits. It would also be required if it had been a demotion, a discharge, or a resignation. But those obviously didn't apply here. Meanwhile, 5 weeks after the man's arrest, the official Facebook page for the sheriff's office suggested, and they actually addressed this, suggested that the deputy moved the vehicle to get the vehicle on a flat surface to avoid damaging it during loading. So they either didn't know about the GPS records, or they just thought, well, we'll make up a story and it'll be kind of like our word against theirs. That post says that the deputy admitted to driving the vehicle a short distance, that's the quote, a short distance, before bringing it back to the location and positioning it to be loaded onto the wrecker. At that time, the case remained under investigation, and the sheriff's office noted that it named the sheriff's deputy here Employee of the Month in February of 2021 and commended him for the highest amount of drug and DUI arrests. So the man's apparently racking up the score when it comes to arresting people for drugs and DUIs, but the question is, what's he doing when he gets behind the wheels of their cars? He'd been employed as a Georgia law enforcement officer for just 7 months. Meanwhile, that post gathered about 100 comments before the sheriff's office turned off the commentary. So somebody filed an open records request for the personnel policy of the Towns County Sheriff's Office, and as of publishing here, the TCSO has not responded. They were talking about, of course, the GeorgiaVirtue.com website. Towns County is located within the Judicial Circuit of the Superior Court 9th District. After more than a year, this man's case, the original case that started all this, is still pending in Towns County. Court records show arraignment for the case is in the first week of October. So that's quite a while to go from the arrest to a full year later before even being arraigned. But the bigger question, of course, is what was that deputy doing in that Corvette when the app showed it exceeding those speeds? The media coverage of the sheriff has been less than favorable recently. Over the summer, video captured the sheriff in a roadside dispute with a sergeant from another police department, and later another video surfaced in which he called the Hiawassee Police Department the enemy. A third video followed in which an ununiformed and irate Henderson, who never identified himself to a motorist, make a traffic stop in an unmarked vehicle. He was first sworn in 2021. Prior to serving as the county's top law enforcement officer, he worked for 38 years as the chief of police at Young Harris College after helping establish that agency in 1984. And you might be wondering, and yeah, I'm glad I don't live in Georgia, because I suspect if I did videos like these and I lived in Georgia, I might get stopped by the police. Now, I mentioned earlier that they charged the man who was behind the wheel of the Corvette with driving under the influence and laying drag. And one of the things is that a lot of times when they're drafting motor vehicle codes, they often use really weird phrases. It happens in all of the laws. And so, for instance, a drag race might be called a competition of speed or something. And so laying drag, of course, I'm assuming it has to do with drag racing. And I'm not really even sure where the word drag came from when it comes to drag racing. But it's just one of those old terms that everyone understands. So under the Georgia Code, Title 40, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Chapter 6, Uniform Rules of the Road, Article 11, Miscellaneous Provisions, Section 40-6-251, driving in circular or zigzag course, semicolon, laying drags. So, of course, driving in a circular course, I assume they mean doing donuts, okay? If the road drives in a circular course like a roundabout, that can't be illegal. So they're talking about doing donuts. The zigzag course would be fishtailing. Some people do that when they're trying to get their tires to smoke. And laying drag, of course, I suspect is another way of saying drag racing. But if you're really, really unhip, you say, I'm laying drag. But the code says, no driver of any motor vehicle shall operate the vehicle upon the public streets, highways, public or private driveways, etc., by intentionally and unnecessarily causing the vehicle to move in a zigzag or circular course, or to gyrate or spin around, except to avoid a collision or injury or damage. The offenses described in this code shall be sufficiently identified on any traffic ticket, warrant, accusation, or indictment when referred to simply as laying drags. And any person who does this can be guilty of a misdemeanor. But it's unnecessarily, but intentionally, causing the vehicle to move in a zigzag or circular course or to gyrate or spin around. It sounds sexy if you can get your car to gyrate. But you can gyrate to avoid a collision or injury or damage. So there you go. But the bigger question is, man's out driving his friend's Corvette. The man's an Army Ranger who deserves our respect. And he gets pulled over for DUI, which, if true, he deserves punishment. But once he's separated from his friend's Corvette, the app shows the Corvette out doing 100 miles an hour. And when confronted, the sheriff's department says, oh no, the guy just got in the car and moved it to level ground to help the record driver, which, by the way, is nonsense. In all the years I drove a wrecker, which was a couple of years, and I towed many, many vehicles, I never once asked the police, nor did I ever see them move a car for my benefit. I would show up and there'd be cars in weird places. They could have done something, but they're just standing there waiting for me going, dude, it's your job. You take care of it. And I would do it. That was my job. And so the idea that a deputy needed to move this car to level ground, they didn't say move it to get it out of traffic. They didn't say move it to put it in a safer place. They claim they did this just to help out the record driver. But the app shows sometime between when the man got out of his car and the record driver shows up, the car's doing 100 miles per hour. There you go. So that's a crazy case. And as of right now, it appears that the only thing that happened was the sheriff's deputy got a slap on the wrist. He was suspended for a couple weeks. But even that's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. So we'll see what happens, if anything, beyond this, but we're glad to publicize the story. From the GeorgiaVirtue.com website, Jessica Svilyagi wrote that, and Charlton sent it to me. Charlton, thank you very much. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. It ain't what they call you, it's what you answer to.